Have you ever noticed how painted images are all around us? That's where I come in. I'm a curator at an art gallery. I choose paintings for people to look at, and I'm on a mission to show you why looking is worth it, to show you why painting matters. It can challenge you, play with you, and even lift your soul. Come with me on this journey through art and you'll see the world through new eyes. For centuries, the only way to capture someone's image was with a painted portrait. But these days, it seems almost every handheld device can do the same job. Digital portraits pile up in their millions on the internet, a vast cyber gallery where pixels triumph over paint. Some of the most famous paintings in the world are of faces, from Vincent van Gogh with his famous blazing look, all the way back to the Mona Lisa, smiling serenely at viewers for centuries. But how are portrait painters facing up to life right here in the 21st century? In this digital day and age, are painted portraits still worth looking at? Portraits are like windows onto the past, showing how people used to look. These faces were made 2,000 years ago to accompany Egyptian souls into the afterlife, but they feel so close, so intimate. When it comes to portraiture, there are a few handy things to know. First, only the highborn, the royal, the really bloody wealthy could afford a painter to soup up their public appearance. And they wanted to put their best foot forward, to be recorded in exquisite detail. Portraits were propaganda for the upper class. Marie Antoinette lopping heads off roses, not people. Randy Henry VIII looking fatherly. And Queen Elizabeth covered in eyes and ears to remind you she saw and heard everything. But sometimes the propaganda misses the mark. Some praised Lucian Freud for keeping it real with Queen Elizabeth II. Others thought he should be locked in the Tower of London. Some faces stir up love and outrage in equal measures. This is Ina Te Papatahi of the Ngāpuhi tribe. She was painted more than 20 times by Charles Frederick Goldie. Goldie has been revered for more than 100 years for his fastidious portrayals of elderly Maori. But he's also been criticised, hated even, by critics who see his work as sentimental kitsch, who believe he's showing Maori from a grim European perspective, as a race on its last breath. But there's a twist. Even as these paintings have been criticised, they have been reclaimed and revered by the descendants of the very people in these portraits, reclaimed as priceless connections to that family past. And more than that, as ancestral presences who are not locked in the distance of history, but living with us here and now. But as it travels towards the 20th century, the good ship of portraiture starts to creak and flounder. Photographers muscle in on the portrait painter's act, and the painted portraits that remain start to look a bit stuffy. Here they all are, headmasters, the bishops, the patrons, solid, foursquare, and very institutional. These portraits are competent, but they're also, sorry guys, about as interesting as sitting through a trustees meeting about school uniforms. They record the subject's prestige and profession, but leave any personality in the dark. But occasionally an amateur portrait will come along and do more than the official ones, do more than just record a likeness. And with that in mind, I'm heading south to meet one of my ancestors at the Forrester Gallery in Oamaru, in what was once the Bank of New South Wales. My great-great-grandfather is downstairs. This is the only portrait ever painted of John Patton. Before seeing it, I had no idea what he looked like. He died in 1905 and no family photographs exist of him. But this portrait tells me more than any photograph ever could. I just have to read the clues. The first thing I notice is it's black. It's the black of soot, of onyx, of gabardine. It's the black you get when an oil lamp goes out. And it half envelops everything in the room, from the red drape at top left to John Paton himself with his ashen hands. Details are buried so deep in the blackness you have to get close to draw them out. I can read the fine print on John Paton's copy of the Oamaru Mail, right down to the date. I can count every whisker on his beard, see his mouth slightly open as if he's about to speak. I expected to visit this painting and feel a kind of family warmth, but instead there's something unnerving. The reason is haunting. John Paton was already dead. With no photos to remember John by, his grieving family called their neighbour, 24-year-old painter May Buick, to the house the day after he died to preserve his memory. I can only imagine how eerie it must have been for young May to sit alone with a dead body for hours. You can forgive this amateur artist the portrait's technical flaws. The space is flat, the figure's oddly cramped within it, and there are all these little lurches of scale and proportion. That hand's a different size than that hand. But they only make the painting more riveting. Move in close to look and find yourself hooked by possible stories. Was it because John Paton died on a Wednesday that May Buick chose to paint Thursday's newspaper? The flowers in the vase are peonies, a symbol of wealth and virtue. The butterfly is a symbol of transience and tumbles downwards on the vase. And on John's plate is a partly eaten browning apple, a sign of decay, of a feast unfinished, of life cut off too soon. It's as if under cover of this formal portrait, May has embedded all these clues about how it felt for her to stare straight at the fact of death. But one detail strikes me more than all the others. It was only after looking at this painting of a dead man for a while that the obvious thought occurred to me, that May was painting someone whose eyes were closed. John Paton's eyes, which seemed to see her, were the only details she couldn't observe. Ice, sky, sapphires, choose your metaphor, but those eyes are blue. And they stare out at us with an intensity, a life that defies the signs of death all around. In this small and little-known painting, May reveals a big truth about the power of portraits. In paintings, things that are silent and still, the past can sit up and speak. Any portrait tells a story about how a person looks, and a great portrait also tells a story about how the painter feels about that person. But how do those stories change when painters paint themselves? How am I looking? We're told it's wrong to stare at other people, but what about staring at ourselves? Most of us give our reflections an occasional look and then keep moving. But there's a special breed of portrait painters who refuse to leave the mirror alone, and what they find in there is not one face but many. The great Dutch painter Rembrandt portrayed himself more than 90 times. As a beggar, a father, a leader, a lover, a whiz kid, and a wise old guy. No sooner does he get one self down than he seems to start sketching a new one. The result is a one-man multitude. And here's a New Zealand response to the idea of the multiple self. A wall full of portraits by Seraphine Pick with the telling title, Looking Like Someone Else. We like to say to each other, just be yourself. But what if you're not sure what kind of self you're meant to be? And what if the way you see yourself doesn't match up with the way the culture out there sees you? No sooner do we find the artist than her face is replaced by stand-ins and blurry decoys. She's rejecting the idea that portraits ought to lay bare a person's secrets. The woman who haunts these paintings is masked. She's half erased. She pulls a veil of hair over her face. She won't be pinned down. British artist Stanley Spencer also painted himself many times, and he made his last self-portrait knowing he had cancer. With short, dry dabs, the artist takes final stock of his own appearance. The wattled neck, the scruff-pot hair, and above all, his magnified eyes. He's close to death, but those eyes tell us he still has what a portrait painter needs. He still sees himself. That hard stare says, "Look at me. I'm here. I was here. Remember me." But artists obsessed with their mirror selves have got to watch out. There's a risk of getting boring when your three favourite topics are me, myself and I. The best self-portrait artists of recent times face right up to the problem by reminding us that we're never truly by ourselves. Now, Jacqueline Fahey is the painter of some of the least lonely self-portraits you're likely to see. The self she paints isn't standing by herself in her studio. She's too busy contending with other pressures, other lives, other voices. With the voice of her mother on the left here, the spill and distraction of domestic life in the foreground, or with the pressures of the past in these photographs. Portraiture here isn't about removing yourself from the world, saying, "I'm alone, I'm special." It's a way of engaging and arguing with the wider world. And the hunt for high-pressure self-portraits leads down south to the Dunedin studio of Geoffrey Harris.
I mainly listen to classical music, but I used to listen...
An artist who has painted himself more often and stared at himself harder than almost any other New Zealand painter. Geoffrey's described his work as a kind of secret self-interview, as well as a diary of painted pain. His self-portraits are gnarly, nervy, electric and plentiful, and he often rummages in his own past.
I mean, the light's fantastic there.
Finding inspiration for portraits in old family photographs.
Those two to me are classics.
You feel the weight of personal history in Geoffrey's studio. It's like a reef. I mean, there's stacks of paintings, there's a huge midden of paint tubes. Do you like having that history near at hand?
Yeah, it's like having the books or the CDs and that, which I've got thousands of, and I never get rid of any.
It's almost too much to take in, and his paintings share that intensity. He's constantly shaking up his own style, testing the limits of traditional self-portraits. This painting is the opening chapter in Harris's lifelong self-interview. The young Harris lays out his favourite books like sacred texts, declaring his faith in art. Behind him hangs a painting of his own, and a winding road and gloomy noose tell us his journey will be long and risky.
Some of the traditional things that people think about portraits don't interest me at all. It's not like you've got a formula and then you can say to 5 artists, follow this formula and you'll come up with great paintings. No, you won't, because they haven't felt it. It hasn't come through their head or their heart.
And one head and heart often contains several lives. This self-portrait is like a study of innocence and experience. As you look, it turns from one face into two. Where the shaping sidelight moves across, the expression is clear and the gaze frighteningly alert. Where the light doesn't reach, it's haggard, squinting, 5 o'clock shadowed. And there's no deciding which of these faces holds sway. Harris paints the self under pressure, and in this work called Family, the artist is half brushed in, out on the edge of the family triangle. All around him is a tangle of other lives, a nuclear family unravelling at the seams. It doesn't look finished, and that's his point. Our lives and loves are a work in progress. And the paintings are too. Harris returns to these faces over years and decades, slowly filling in their stories.
So this is a painting started in 1976.
But you've been working on this recently.
Yeah, the faces are much more of now. Because I have so many ideas and images, it's like having so many books that I can't read them all, so much music that I can't listen to. I started so many paintings and half are unfinished. This is at my grandparents' place. It's called Cousins.
Clearly, this is that, and yet at the same time, so clearly, this is not that. I'm especially fascinated by, well, the faces are not these fresh-faced youngsters, are they? They are something else.
When I paint it, I'm not looking and saying, oh, that's Gillian, so she was like that and that, and I'm thinking, now this, I'm painting Gillian. I'm not painting Gillian, I'm painting, I guess I'm painting me.
Jeffrey's made a kind of family album, but one with his own thoughts and feelings in every image. These are all self-portraits. So many of the details sit on the razor's edge of confession, while some truths remain muffled or concealed. This is an artist who is constantly remaking himself in paint, and those new selves take courage to confront.
Some people still find a lot of my work scary because it's, to them, it's too intense. I wouldn't call it confrontational, but it demands a response.
The pleasure of self-portraits is how they take us on a journey inside other states of mind. From Rembrandt's vigour to Spencer's courage to Fahey's great appetite for chaos. In the end, self-portraiture gives us a chance to try on other lives. The only question is, in this age of digitally enhanced faces, do portraits need to be painted at all? In the old days, portraits were a way for royals and aristocrats to literally put on a good face. But these days, looking drop-dead gorgeous is something everyone's supposed to be obsessed with. What's a portrait painted to do? Put on your face, make yourself up, become a better you. In the age of cosmetics and plastic surgery, everyone's become an artist of their own appearance, busy trying to bring their own face in line with the popular ideal. And this has opened up a new job for portrait painters, charting the contours of a strange, new, contemporary face. A face that tells us less about the inner feelings of one person than it does about the fears and fantasies of the wider culture. British painter Jenny Saville does beauty with bite. The beauty's in the paintwork, lush and confident. The bite's in what the paint describes. Faces that are fractured, swollen, alarmingly reshaped. Are these women victims of war or violence, or are they recovering from that strange ordeal called plastic surgery? Either way, there's one detail Saville makes shockingly clear: the eyes. They're hard to look at, but even harder to look away from. American John Curran has made a career from pushing beauty into the bizarre. Sometimes he gets there by blowing things out of proportion. Sometimes with details that niggle in weirder ways. A model with a walking stick, or impossibly thin and bendy body. He paints the humour and horror of looking wrong in a world obsessed by looking right. The dream of looking perfect has also inspired New Zealand's sharpest portrait painter, Peter Stitchbury. Peter started out painting real lookers, living dolls and young blank beauties, airbrushed, gleaming, dead perfect.
It's the stereotype of somebody that's beautiful.
But lately he's been paying ultra close attention to people who don't usually receive it. You had your sort of super smooth, plastic surgerised, immaculate young lovelies.
Yep.
And then you have these geeky biochemistry types that you're painting at the moment.
It's quite an easy equation to paint someone that's beautiful. It's on every billboard, it's on every magazine cover. People are used to that, but they're not so much used to this. So I just thought, you know, it's time to tell the rest of the story. This is a real woman. I sourced her from the internet. And what I did was I went back into my past when I was at high school. And there was a girl that came when she was 15 to our school, and she was a little overweight, kind of greasy, lank hair. But because she was an outsider, she got persecuted right from the outset. And what I've done is I've kind of made an amalgam of my memory of this girl. I've kind of beautified her in a way, and I like that idea of putting the spotlight back on those people, because at school they were kind of persecuted.
So you're interested in that gap between how we look and how we are?
Yeah, this is a lot more interesting for me because there's so much depth to the characters. Like, for example, this guy, he was a science teacher. It's not really him, once again, it's an amalgam of someone I found on the internet. He was another guy that was kind of tormented at school. and he had a speech impediment. And I remember someone threw an apple at him and it just missed the back of his head and it smashed on the blackboard. And I thought, you know, this is a really great character to venerate.
I look at this massive noggin and find myself laughing, then I feel bad for laughing, and then I wonder about my response. And then the penny drops. Peter's not just out to reveal the appearance of the people inside the paintings, he's out to reveal the dreams and expectations of the people standing in front of them.
It's one of those things where you have to confront your own biases and judgments. It's more satisfying to me to make something that's more truthful, even if it's a little bit cartoonish.
Stitchbury knows how much people like looking at other people. But these days there's a vast new place to satisfy that desire, on the computer screen.
Now there's this endlessly ramifying world of staring. We all sit at our screens and we can stare and stare and stare.
Yeah.
What can painting add to that equation?
Yeah. There's this one guy I used, just searching a blog, and I found this young internet dude, and on his homepage there's a picture of him and it says, "Hi, my name's Zach Klein, I'm a designer from Brooklyn." The only thing on his website was this beautiful photograph of himself. He's handsome, but he styled himself in a really geeky way. Then I realised that he'd built this amazing persona for himself using Twitter and Facebook and MySpace. I started to get a really good feeling of knowing him, but I didn't know him. So I emailed him and I said, "I'd really like to paint you. I think it'd be a great subject." I sent him the finished painting and he was like, "Wow, this is awesome," and he blogged it. It was weird because his persona had kind of fed back into the machine. Now there's sort of two Zach Kleins. There's this photographic version and the painted version.
But how can paint compete with pixels? Don't digital portraits reach an audience of squillions, leaving painted portraits alone on the wall?
You know, everything has a really short lifespan online, but with a painting, you've got that permanence where if it goes into a museum or someone's home, it can get continually looked at.
Peter's new characters demand to be looked at. He launches an all-out revenge of the nerds and challenges ideas about appearance. Enshrined forever in oil paint, these shrinking violets and shy guys turn into unlikely heroes. And his work has taken on its own life in the online gallery where everyday people get to be the judge. Portraits are people paintings, and we all need that vitamin P. We need it because portraits bring the distant past to life. Because they encourage us to imagine the world through other eyes. And when we're sick of ourselves, to try on a fresh disguise. And we need them because even in a digital age, painted portraits take us back to a basic human fact. Faces are fascinating for good reason. Everybody's got one, and we can't stop staring at them. Now, if I were to stare too hard at some of the faces around me, I might get punched in mine. But the power and the appeal of portraits is that they want to be stared at. And if the portrait's a good one, you'll feel it looking back through time, looking back at the wider culture, and looking back at you.